Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025, and today we are getting the pleasure of checking back in with our friends Mikey and Kez at Five Tails Farm down there in the Southern Hemi to see how their season is going so far. We discuss some early season, i.e. spring, cash flow challenges and how they manage that, like on a literal technical level. We talk about their lo-fi tomato grafting and some farm team dynamics. Very cool stuff, as always, and couldn't be more honored to have them on every single month. They're the best, so let's do it. All right, Mikey and Kez, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hi.
I'm very excited about this because I love our little monthly or almost monthly chats. So it is, as we record this, like almost December. Give us a little rundown. What are you all doing on the farm right now?
Well, we're in the last week of November, which is kind of like, technically like the last month of spring. Since we last chatted, our 2 new seasonal workers have started. So now we're a team of 5, which is really exciting. So we've just been like getting to know each other pretty much in the last 3 weeks, doing a lot of training. You know, people come from all sorts of backgrounds. Like this year we have Oren Bridget. Bridget is coming from like a bigger acre farm. So we had to like adjust to what we're doing here. All comes from like hospitality and chefing, background. So getting to slowly teaching her the other side, of that kind of scene. So there's been a lot of training and a lot of getting to know each other, which has also just been really exciting. Like we spoke a bit about it last time, like the team and our summer team on the farm is really like the heart and soul of what we do. Like we love having big lunches, we love being together. So it's always like really exciting to kind of get that first initial connection and know that, by April we'll all be just one big happy family. So obviously like lots of challenges around training, and I actually enjoyed a lot of your content around like how do we, I think it was the few podcasts that you did when you were talking about the soccer practice and how you use that to help out with stuff and explaining. So we had a lot of chats with us and Jay and, how do we teach well, how do we take responsibilities over their learnings, and how to do that efficiently. So that's been a big part of what we're doing in the last month. It's also been Mike, you can talk, incredibly wet and cold November for us. It has been quite a dry winter, and it's been a very wet spring. We're almost double our rainfall of November.
Probably
almost
60 to 70% more than we get, in this month.
Wow.
So that will connect a bit to what we'll talk about later on, but it's been a bit hard because a lot of our summer crops that are outside are really suffering from the cold and the wet. So like by the end of November, we should be pumping zucchinis, which is a big part of our cash flow plan. And there's like 0. They just started this week. So that's not really fun. It's just been so raining, like literally today. Now it's 9 p.m. And Jay just walked in from like broad forking because this is the only sunny day we had this week. And then we have another 7 day of rain. So it's really hard to just bed prep. It's really hard to flip beds. All the crops that are out of the big, nice greenhouses are just a bit stunted.
Yeah, I know that we had like a record-breaking rain this spring. Like in general, our rain was somewhere in that like 50% more than usual range going. And then I think we talked about this maybe last time that it immediately went into a drought in July. For 2 months, we basically got no rain, but we had something like 40 inches. I'm not sure what that is for you all, but
That's
it was 40 inches by July. And then now we're upwards of 60. I think we're at 62 inches right now on the year, and it's raining right now. So it's just, it's been a really wet but very extreme year for us too. And I feel that there's not a lot you can do. I mean, getting out there in the field and broad forking, that's just, it's tough.
Yeah, I think you just got to time stuff. That's kind of it. You got to time stuff. And then I think what we took away from it this year, which again we'll talk about later, is I think just readjusting forecasts and what's realistic. So like there was also a super late frost that never really happens. We have some friends who have a vineyard lost lost basically all the fruit that was growing.
Oh no.
So I think we just took it again to be like every season, just check your assumptions on when's frost coming, what's the rainfall, because an average is an average, but that doesn't mean there aren't going to be anomalies. And then adjust our production and our benchmarking and our forecast around what's actually realistic, or worst case scenario and best case scenario.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's sort of like a prepare for the worst, hope for the best sort of situation there, where like I think that's something I've thought about many times. It's just like instead of being like, oh, we're in a good spot, being like, okay, what if we weren't? So how do we prepare for that? How do you mentally prepare without it being stressful to constantly just be in this like situation where you feel like you're preparing for a disaster, even if a disaster never comes? You know what I mean?
I feel like sometimes also vegetable farmers, because so much of our production is like, obviously we work with the elements, but in terms, if you look across the spectrum of horticulture or agriculture, we kind of have the most controlled elements. Like we have irrigation, basically irrigation. Often we have tunnels, so we can actually control it. So obviously, if there's a drought going on, if we've got water, which most of us do, either through dams or bores or whatever, we can be basically managing the scenario. But I started listening to a podcast about broadacre farming in Australia, so crop, like basically wheat growing and cattle, and it's amazing how they actually have a system for categorizing the year. How's it going in terms of its whether it being a number 10 or a number 1 based on like rainfall and temperature, and what they can be expecting profits to be based upon that, because obviously they're completely at the whim of rainfall. They can't be. It's very difficult to irrigate thousands of hectares. So yeah, I think that's something which I think might be really worthwhile us thinking about as climate becomes a little bit more all over the shop.
Yeah, it's funny. We learned to farm on a dry farm. So they did dry farming on, I think at our peak, we were at like 2.5 acres on that farm, where I was doing my internship and where I met Hannah. And we learned to dry farm. And honestly, that's like some of the best education that I've got for farming now. Like I still use a lot of the tricks that we learned dry farming, in terms of not just like mulches and the obvious stuff, but also just like cultivation techniques and timing and all those things. I learned a lot of that from a dry farm, and there's things that I wish I'd worked on other farms that actually handled irrigation a little bit better, because that was like a deficit for me going in to starting our own sort of micro farm. But like the education that I got from dry farming was like, that is so invaluable in dry years, just having some tricks to be able to use when it's a really dry season.
What were some of those tricks, Jess?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is soil preparation, and a lot of it is like, we were also a tillage farm then, so a lot of it is just timing your cultivations properly, being on your cultivations. So like one of the things that I think a lot of people who do any sort of soil disturbance, even with a tilter, sometimes fail to do is like, after a rain, you are cultivating. If you are not cultivating, you're going to lose moisture, but you're also going to get weeds. And like, if you're not like on it all the time, that will dramatically affect your soil moisture content and all those things. Like a dirt mulch doesn't really work, but if you don't cut it off, I've found that it just, especially in our climate at least, like it will suck that moisture out of the soil. And then let me think of other tricks. I mean, you really, really take care of your, getting your soil organic matter up as fast as possible. Mulching is obviously a sort of emergency mulching. Like if you are in the middle of the drought, getting that mulch layer down, if you don't have it, is really important to just get that moisture to come up to the surface. Plant cover, any sort of, just getting anything planted like that you can, even in the rows. I just I don't know if I can really talk about this yet, because Eric Nordell just sent me a video that maybe I'll link, but he puts rye in the summer times in his pathways. They do a huge dry farm in Pennsylvania and farm it with horses, and they put rye in their pathways. And so that rye will help actually maintain some of that moisture, but also obviously hold the soil there for heavy rainfalls. But it'll actually help maintain some of that moisture in the pathways. And because you're planting it in the summer, rye's not going to go to seed. I've never tried that. That's a really cool idea. We've done it, but I've been experimenting this summer. I was experimenting with teff. So there may be options there, but plant cover makes a huge difference in moisture, and also just the types of mulches you're using, and how you're using them. So Lots of little tricks like that. I'm sure there's other ones that I'm not thinking of that would come to mind, but also soil blocks make a huge difference, I think, too, just because the amount of soil, that helps a lot. Like if you think about soil blocking less as a seed starting program and more of a fertility program, it kind of changes the amount of work that you put into it. Like, the
Actually,
upfront
never
work.
thought about it like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, because I mean, you're doubling or quadrupling in many cases the amount of soil mix that you're using per block. So there's a bigger expense there, but like that's the kind of, I would happily amend my entire garden with potting soil, right? So like, you get it wet, you get a plant growing in there, so you get all those good microbes working, and then you put that kind of bigger chunk in the soil versus like a cell. It's pretty small. Figuring out the time, management there can be a little tricky, but we've got some good systems in place that work okay. And I just think also like changing the perspective on what you're doing is helpful, right? That it's fertility management. So yeah, those are some.
They're great. It's a great list. I think I think sometimes we find ourselves in I don't know. Sometimes we don't think outside the block again. We've got our systems in place, and I think sometimes it's nice to have
head down,
Yeah,
charging
so it's
forward.
nice to have
It's
these
really good to
conversations.
lift your head up and
Yeah.
and just have a broader view of things. Definitely.
Yeah, same. And I'm glad the soccer coaching stuff came in handy, because I'm
Love
like,
it.
I don't know if this
I
is helpful
love
for
it.
people. All right, well, good to hear. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to do a little tomato tour. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. All right, so I think in our October episode, Mikey, that you all said you were planting your tomatoes, and I know you've been doing a little bit of grafting and stuff. Can you talk us a little bit through, maybe start a little bit with like your tomato approach this year, and then just detail a little bit about that your grafting approach as well?
Beautiful. All right, so this season we're ramping up our tomatoes. It's probably the main crop we grow in terms of in terms of volumes, the space it takes up on the farm, and I also think that the income that it generates for the farm. So we're obviously trying to gear up to be able to grow better quality tomatoes each year, and I think a greater yield. I think the prism also to kind of understand the conversation is that, like we've shared before, we have a very small farm. So for us, it's kind of like, how can we always increase the yield per square foot on the farm in any means we can. So this season we invested in a new, we call it a multi-span greenhouse, so a connected greenhouse. Has about 3 meter gutters, so the tomatoes can get to about 3 meters, and then you've obviously got the extra space above the tomatoes for extra thermal mass. So we basically decided we're looking at how can we increase yield. So one was obviously let's get the greenhouse, and the other one was maybe we should look at grafting our tomatoes. From what I'd been reading, we'd grafted once before, a couple of years back, but only a few, say 50 to 100 plants. And now we're currently growing probably 2,200, 2,300 tomato plants a season. So we're like, okay, from what I'm reading, we can probably get they reckon up to 40% in terms of just the yield of a graft. So you can actually get a 40% increase in yield. Obviously there's a lot of conditions around that. But even just reading that, it was like, okay, let's look at the cost of what it will be to graft, what do we need to do, and then if it's going to give us 40%, that's a huge increase. So I think that was kind of the premise why we decided to do it.
Yeah, we started grafting a few years ago, and we haven't consistently seen 40%, but we've consistently seen like 10, 20, 30%, like just depending on the variety, the combination. It's been for us like a huge boon. Plus disease resistance has been amazing. But there is, like you mentioned, that cost part. So can you talk a little bit about how, like, what your approach was to rootstock and then to the grafting part itself?
Look, I think the cost part is, yeah, it's an interesting one, kind of trying to work out what is the cost per unit and whatnot. The truth is, we think this year we were just like, we're just going to do it. So we're not even going to look at how much the extra cost will be of even grafting. We just want to give it a crack and just see if it works. And then we can kind of, the next season, kind of really break it down to see, okay, what did it cost to graft and what was the yield increase, and to see if it kind of works out. And also, I think what I said to you before is, instead of trialing small and deciding to do like 200 or 300 plants, we decided to do the entire thing, which I think was a probably an error in a way. Like it's like just super risky because, as you know from grafting can go terribly wrong. And if you don't have backup plants, you're essentially cooked your tomatoes for the season. Like you don't have tomatoes. So we put a lot of emphasis on the varieties that we choose. So if we had a massive loss, it's really going to throw out our season. So we went to a big tomato company. I called them up, which I recommend a lot of people do. Like, just pick up the phone, call a seed company, and say, "Can I speak to, like, do you have a tomato expert there?" And often they'll be like, "Yeah, no worries." So I had an hour free consult with their tomato expert, and basically just ran through everything. I was like, "This is my climate zone. This is what I'm growing. What do you recommend? Like, what rootstock should I be looking at?" And yeah, that kind of set us down the journey. So I ended up buying and getting a rootstock called Kaiser that was recommended by them. And I think why Kaiser works well for us, also, first of all, there's not a huge amount of options for small growers. So there's only a limited number of rootstock options, but that's in the Australian context. So we went with something like Kaiser, which is actually a very balanced rootstock. So it really balances the vegetative growth with the generative growth, which, because we're in an organic system and it's low tech, it's really difficult to steer a crop. So the word steering, which you probably know as well, for the listeners, like, steering is obviously how you can shift a crop between the two main forms that they have, either being generative, so they're pushing their energy towards fruiting, or vegetative, so they're producing a lot of leaf mass and they're kind of building themselves up as a plant. So we just have very limited tools to do that. So in high-tech greenhouses, they're obviously playing with humidity, light levels, irrigation. They're the kind of the main three. Temperature. Yeah. But, like, I don't know, our greenhouse, we can roll up the sides.
Yeah.
And we can play with irrigation, but also, like, it's harder to really build on some low-tech irrigation, like big schedules, So for us, it was kind of like, yeah, we decided to find a really balanced rootstock that wasn't overly vegetative, because for us to be able to swing and play is really difficult to do. So we went with a more balanced option for rootstock. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. It makes 100% sense, because I've, like you explained what crop steering is. It's really hard to do when you have very low tech system, when it's just basically, roll up sides. I think that makes a ton of sense. Can you talk a little?
And from what I've understood is also that a lot of the rootstocks that are being bred, they're bred to be vegetative, and really super vegetative. Because if you look at if you're growing a tomato, like, without grafting, people often notice that kind of halfway through the season, they start to kind of get really stretchy and leggy, and they kind of almost like run out of juice, and they're just kind of pushing all of their energy into flowers. So generally, tomatoes are often generative anyway, so that they breed rootstocks to be overly vegetative, so that they can really have these stocky, strong plants, and obviously they've got the tech to be able to steer it to be generative or either way. But for us, in our conditions, like you're saying before, it's just really difficult if you had a rootstock which was bred to be too strong one way or too strong the other. So that's kind of one thing I think I've worked out this year: hunt down rootstock which is a bit more balanced.
That's actually really fascinating. I hadn't heard that before. All right, so talk about the system a little bit. Like, what was your approach to the actual grafting part?
Yeah, well, Kez
Oh,
is
okay.
jumping in as well.
Hi, Kez.
Well, the approach to grafting was because we had success the first time we grafted, which was years ago. We had a really janky setup. We literally we grafted like anyone else would graft, and we used our cool room, as the healing chamber. So we basically plugged in a tiny little heater to keep the temperature controlled in there. And again, like very minimal temperature control. We just kind of put the heater in there. We had little plastic domes, which everyone uses, and I went down to the local hardware store and got some fluorescent lights. And we succeeded that year. We had really good success. We probably had 90 to 100% success rate on a few hundred, like about 100 plants or whatever it was. So I think we were really bolstered by the fact that we could really do this. So we had basically the same approach. We decided that we'd do all the tomatoes. We have a little, like a root cellar, almost like a wine cellar in the back of the house. Put up some fold-out tables, grafted everything, put them in there, and then just plugged in a heater and set it at the correct temperatures.
No, they were under domes.
They were under domes, yeah, under domes. Each one had a dome. And then, plugged in the heater and started following the protocol. Little did we know, Jesse, that without grow lights, difficult to do. We didn't invest in grow lights. Which might have been a massive mistake. We quoted them up and it was going to be really expensive, and we're like, you know what? We're going to try to do it without grow lights. And I think that's where the trouble began. Yeah.
I think the bottom line is that we were very successful. It was just very stressful to get there in a low budget. But the plants are healthy, the graft are amazing. There was just... it was a lot of work. So we put them into this dark room. They all had domes, and then for a few days they were. I can't remember the whole protocol. We can share it. They were in 100%, darkness.
Dark, yeah.
We used to come a few times a day, open the dome, spray with a bottle under, keep the humidity, literally spray by hand, and put a heater there that usually kept it on like 19 degrees, possibly. And then around day 4 or 5, we started taking them out to the shade outside for a few hours and then put them all back into the room. And then the following day we did a bit more and then put them back, and then I did a bit more and then put them back. So like every day we had to move tens of trays between the two rooms. And then they were looking really good and we were just like, look at us like smashing this. And then one day the sun came around the house, and
wow.
They all got like full sun for a few good hours in the afternoon.
Yeah. And they
looked, and that was like, we were just sitting like in the living room at night saying like, okay, we just lost our tomato crop for the year and we'll have to resow. And
like they were all looking completely
really
wilted, like beyond wilty. Like I was thinking, I don't know how these are going to come back to life.
It wasn't a great day, but we took them back in. We sprayed them, we closed the domes.
I had a really good tip that someone said, if you ever screw up, go to the step before.
Oh,
so the step
that's
before
a good tip.
the step was just go to the step before. So if we were taking them out to say 5 hours into light and then bringing them back, when that happened, I was like, okay, we're going to the step before. So the step before was only 1 hour. So we actually went back a step, and the long or the short is we managed to recover almost all the grafts. And I think that was the saving grace, was literally bringing it back a step. We threw all the humidity we could at them. So we just pumped the heat up, gave them 100% humidity again for another probably 36 to 48 hours. And then they all started slowly coming back. But
there were a few varieties that didn't survive that. Also on that panic day, I went in and just resowed a bunch of tomatoes. So we ended up using some of those. Like we had a few varieties that were completely wiped, but most of them made a really beautiful recovery. And after that, we were very careful with the direct sunlight, and then it became kind of like smooth sailing after that.
Yeah, well, I think, as I said before, that consult we did, Jess, with the seed company, he said like a lot of the industry people that are doing are getting 50%. That's like their 50% graft rate, which I thought was pretty shockingly low.
Wow, that's really
so
low.
So we were pretty pumped when we started to. We're like, okay, we thought, it'd be 60%, and then we thought, okay, it's actually going to be 70%. And I honestly reckon we got 80% plus. So we were pretty stoked with that in the end, I think, even with all the troubles.
Yeah, that's great. I think that your setup there sounds very similar to my own. Like your approach does sounds really similar to my own. We're doing basically goes into a dark space and then comes in a dark warm space. Then it comes out and goes onto our like table in our house, kind of close to a window. I do that at night, and then I let it kind of get a little bit of sun the next day, just from like I increasingly move it into the light, move the trays into the light. And then after that is, slowly, increasingly taking it out to the greenhouse, and then I use shade cloth. So I basically am taking the light away, increasingly a day after day, and then that usually works. And I get, I would say 95%
That's
success.
Epic. I think the shade cloth is a banger.
Yeah, that to me was just like, instead of like you were doing, moving it back and forth, we did that the first season. I was like, this is a lot. So yeah, ended up, and especially for the number of plants you're doing, like we're not doing that many. I think we're doing, maybe 100 plants grafted like that, but then at a time. So then basically, yeah, just pulling that shade cloth back that made all the difference to us. So yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, look, I think the
go ahead.
the takeaway is I think we'd do it again.
I think there was a few takeaways. One, we have to time the grafts to the other varieties in a better way, because they were a lot vigorous and bigger. Like this, the diameter of the stem was a lot bigger on the, sorry, how do you call the bottom bit?
Rootstock.
The rootstock was a lot thicker, so we had to time that a bit better. And definitely I would, in our current setup, would put a grow light in, because it would just save us so much time and effort.
Yeah.
Because it was really a lot of labor to move them around back and forth, and it was quite stressful.
Yeah. The only thing I've found with the rootstock size, like matching those up, is the taking a basically moving, like starting them on different trays, obviously, and then steering them, like literally taking the ones that are growing faster and putting them in a cooler part of my greenhouse and just slowing them down. And that has worked for the most part, but it is a little bit more intensive. And maybe, not everybody has a cooler part of their greenhouse. We do, because our greenhouse is just as low budget as everything else. But yeah, that's, and we would have a heat pad, so I could kind of warm them up a little bit and just, move things around as needed and try and steer it a little bit that way. I think with that, we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk cash flow in the springtime. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so spring is often like a really complicated time on farms, because it's like the most expensive time on the farm, and generally like with the least amount of cash flow for lots of reasons. So what do you all think about that? Like, what do you all do about that?
So I think I'll go back a step and just explain a little bit about kind of like our accounting stuff. I think Mikey talked a little bit about it in your first chat that you had a few months ago, but I think something that really is helping us throughout the year, but especially at times where we need to be really prepared, are two things. One is we found a really good accountant, which I can't really emphasize how important it is. Like we went through a few, and until we found the person that fitted us the best, that really changed our operation, because what we do is he obviously does like our quarterly tax and he does our yearly tax, but we pay him a bit extra to have 4 meetings a year where we sit together and we choose a topic that we want to talk about. So usually what we do is we kind of keep those meetings to autumn and winter and have them all then, rather than when we're really busy in spring and summer. And we'll go over, obviously, our numbers and what did well and what accounts did well, but what we really emphasize is doing quite a significant cash flow projection. So we sit down and we try and plan at least the spring and summer, which is also the season that we hire, to make sure that we can hit those targets. And we try and do quite a particular crop plan that fits with it, and then we were able to say, okay, we're estimating that we can make this much money a week for October, this much money a week for November, so on, and kind of copy our expenses from the previous year and try to update them for this year. And then I can say, oh, I can give a raise, I can hire this, this month is going to be really tight. This month we're actually going to lose money, but, I can look at the cash that I have now and, we're able to absorb that. So you get kind of like a broad plan of how the year's looking. And for us, it just helped us to make a lot of really good decisions, or maybe make big decisions less scary, like, pay rises or hiring or getting, a new truck or a new infrastructure or something like that. So that's kind of like the one thing that's been super helpful for me, and having a good partner to help you do that is really important. Thank you, Jamie. The other thing that's been helping us a lot this spring is the Profit First protocol that we follow, which Mikey spoke a little bit about before. I don't want to get into too much explaining about the whole system. There's a really easy to read book called Profit First that I really recommend people to read. Also for personal finance. For me, it's super simple. It's not scary when it comes to big money planning. It's very basic. It's kind of like when our grandmas used to, or at least my grandma, get her wage in cash and divide it into, this is my cash for groceries. This is for bills. It's just a way to take a lump sum of money that you have and organize it in a way that's more intuitive. So how it looks is that basically me and Mikey, when we open our banking app, we have 7 different bank accounts for the business. So what we had before is that I would go into my bank account. I've got one bank account. That's where all the money goes into from our customers. And that's where I pay everything from. So I'll throw in a number, let's say 90K. Okay, so I open my bank account, bang, 90K. And I was like, yes. I got heaps of cash. Let's get this, whatever. Let's get another load of compost. Let's get more whatever we need to do, we can do it. Because when I open, I just see that number on my screen and I was like, cool, we're good. But the truth is that that number has a lot of hidden things in it that have already been committed to. So there's wages, there is tax, huge. There is workers' insurance. We have to have certain insurance for our employees. There's direct costs, like my seed cost and my packaging cost and my label cost, things that I have to have in order to sell products. So basically, technically, I have this 90K, but I really don't. So what the Profit First helps us to do is to break down that lump sum into more realistic, how do I explain it?
Categories.
Categories, thank you. So every 2 weeks, I have an Excel that's like a calculator, and I can send you a photo of it. We can put it up so people can see. So basically, every 2 weeks, I go in and I put in, I've got my income account. In my income account, it's just money coming in. Then I have a few other accounts. One of them is my operating expenses account, which is just my ongoing cost for pretty much everything but wages. I've got my materials and supplies, which is my cost of sale account, which is everything that's directed to myself. So seed, labels, and packaging, just that. Then I have my employees account, which is all the money that needs to go to wages. I've got my owner's pay account, which is me and Mikey's money, pay. And then I have a tax account. sorry. And then I've got a profit account. Okay. Now the tax and the profit account are savings accounts, and which I get interest on, and then everything else is just every day. So every 2 weeks, for example, I made 20K over those last 2 weeks. I divide that money up with percentages. So 20% will always go to tax because we're a company, we pay company tax. So no matter what, for every cent that I get, I put 20% of it away for tax in a saving account that make interest, and I don't touch it. So I never get a surprise when I get my quarterly tax or when I get the end of the year tax. I never get panic. I was like, oh, I gotta get 14K now. Like, where does that come from? It's always there. And if I'm happy and lucky to pay less tax, then I've got that money to then use it to whatever I wanted to do. The other thing is that I'll always have enough money to pay employees for, in really good times of the year, 2 weeks ahead. Now, for example, in spring, I will always have a month of wages in there that I'm not touching. So I'll never be stressed about that. So in my percentages compared, like depending on how much money we make, I make sure I always have like the sum that I need for my workers, and I make sure that that money goes there. Then there's always 10% that goes to the materials and supplies, which is my cost of sale. And then basically whatever is left, we decide if we pay ourselves. I think Profit First dude is not going to be happy with that because he's like, always pay yourself, da 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 da. But in our real world, if it's a really hard month, then me and Mikey won't get paid. But, you know, the business and the farm pays on a lot of our life expenses. We live cheap, and the farm pays for most of our, you know, ongoing stuff, if it's mortgage and bills and electricity and stuff. And then everything else can either go a little bit to profit. So usually we'll put 5% aside for profit, and then the rest will go to OPEX. So basically, whatever's left after I paid everything that I needed to do, I paid us, I paid the employees, I put some money aside, I put some money for tax. And that determines my running cost. So if I have 2 weeks ahead of me before I do another allocation, and all I have left from my OPEX is $3,000, then the farm will run on $3,000. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it limits me to where I'm actually at. So so at the start of the week, I'll do like our manager meeting, and I'll tell the guys, look guys, like we're tight this week, so you know, we can't order compost, or we have to deal with what we have until we have another allocation, or we have another distribution of cash. And then on month that we're doing a lot better, I'll know, oh, we have some wiggle room, let's buy that compost, let's get, you know, this, let's get that. Let's make sure we can pay, you know, we have to make sure we can pay that loan. It just helps me take off all the stuff that we have to take off in spring, if that makes sense. I think it was a bit wordy, but
makes sense.
But just the fact that I open my app, I wish I can show it, but I think that's probably not cool. Like, I'll open my app and I'll have like, I can see exactly OPEX, $2,000, $3,000, $7,000, whatever in there. I have my employees, and it's, you know, there's 20K in there. So I know that no matter what happens this month with the rain and there's no zucchinis because it's so cold, I've got that money to pay them. And if I didn't have that, all I would have seen is $90,000, for example, and my brain will automatically feel like, okay, we're doing well, we've got the money. But really, 14,000 of this needs to go to tax, 20,000 of that need to go to workers and insurance.
I love that. There's a few things that I think I want to emphasize there too that I think are really important. One is the savings account thing that you mentioned. The fact that, like, I think this happens a lot when you get lump sums, like in the CSA, for instance, you're bringing in tens of thousands of dollars or whatever. And you know, I love the checking account, the multiple checking. I've never thought of that, and I love that. But the thing about the savings account I think is really interesting is that oftentimes people just have those in regular savings accounts, and they're getting 15 cents, 20 cents a month or something, even with a lot of money in there. And they don't realize, like, that is a waste of that money that almost all banks have. I don't know how things are in Australia, but we have accounts here in the US where you can basically put them in and you'll get 2 or 3% back. And so, like, you end up with making 50, or, you know, depending on how much money is in there, like $50 or $100 a month, on a big chunk of cash that, you know, is not just an obnoxious line item that you have to put in. Suddenly it's like, oh, it has some value and it's making, you know, it's having some return. So I think that's an important thing. And also the month ahead on wages, that is something I did not think hard enough about when we started having employees, is having enough cash to cover them for like an extended period of time. And that's when you, especially in the springtime, when you run into those issues of just like, oh, okay, we're really low on money right now, but we have to pay this person. Getting that stress off your back so that it's just like, we know this person is covered for the next month. We're like, that I think is a huge goal going into the end of your season the year before, just to make sure that you're like thinking about that for the next year if you're planning on hiring or if you already hire. So yeah, I think those were really good points.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share on that? Because it's pretty big for our, I think, how we run our business.
I think it's pretty big. Look, we don't. I think we can get a lot better. There's a whole techniques on how to improve from quarter to quarter and make sure that that the owner is getting enough money and that we do put the money away for profit. But it's just I don't know how to run without it anymore. If you know what I mean, it really dictates before I pay something. It makes me stop and think: do I need it? Can I do without it? And I think that frugalness sometimes in business is really important. And that together with a good cash flow projection and a good crop plan, I mean, at the end of the day, I really do think that everything comes out to good planning. Just like crop planning in the field gives us successions and gives us ongoing harvest that we spoke about it. So it's the same here. And I think this year, for example, we were like confident that zucchini will be popping in November, and we put the targets for that. And now we understand that we have to have a different buffer, or we have to make sure that we spend less at the end of summer on like big farm infrastructure to make sure that we keep that money for a really hard October and November.
Yeah.
That's we all feel like kings and queens in midsummer when the tomatoes are pumping, and then suddenly, you're trying to sell daikon like your life depends on it in October.
I mean, I think that is also like a really big lesson we learned, is just like when you're at your most flush is when you should be your most conservative. And just because of that exact feeling of just like, oh, I'm on top of the world, I've got all the money in the world, and not thinking about when you don't. And I think those are really important points. Mikey, Kez, I love these chats. I hope we can continue doing them. Thank you so much for your time. You all are the best.
Perfect. Thanks, man. It's been awesome, and also cracker timing because I think Raya's waking up, so you've nailed it, dude. You've nailed it.
Well, tend to that and send Raya my best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
All right.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that talk with Mikey and Kez and this whole series that we've done with them. I just absolutely adore those two. Really appreciate their time. Make sure to follow Five Tails Farm at Instagram and all the places. We will hook it up with links in the show notes. Also, I totally forgot that I had a Patreon question for Mikey and Kez, so we will get that to them next month whenever we chat later on. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. And also my wife, Hannah, for everything in the world. Also shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of December, you get a shout on the show. So big shout outs today to, drum roll please, Jackson Roulette, who obviously is the person that helped me start No Till Growers. So big shouts to Jackson, Robin Garner, Thomas, Patrick Daubert, Christopher Frazier, and David Bonell. Shouts you all. All right, so as you will remember from yesterday's story, Madeline, our aging but still brilliant and very much respected actress, is starting a one-woman show, but for movie theaters. And you may be like, what? Like, is it just a movie? No, it's a good question. In fact, that was the same question that many movie theaters were asking when Madeline's team first approached them about this idea. But it basically works like this. Every theater that is willing to do it will get their own actress, and they will be given a film to play at the same time in a very simple PA system to set up. Technical details are totally worked out. And that's basically it. The theater just has to kind of like hit play and the actress does the rest. Because Madeline was very well respected and it was rumored that legends like Meryl Streep were even going to show up at one of these theaters and play the part, it had a lot of buzz. On opening night, there were 20 theaters or so all over the world that had signed on. Some in the obvious places like New York, San Francisco, LA, London, that sort of stuff. But then some in some small cities like Lexington, Kentucky. Shouts to the Kentucky Theater. And that just had cool old movie theaters with owners who were game for whatever. What happened on opening night? Well, that is for tomorrow on Don't Make a Scene. Oh, I actually like that one. It fits pretty well. Maybe that's the title. Anyway, we'll find out tomorrow. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you then. Bye.